Welcome to Beyond the Numbers, the podcast where conversations about wealth go deeper. This isn't about flashy success or one-size-fits-all advice. It's about real people designing financial lives that align with who they are, what they value, and the legacies they're building. We bring together voices from business, finance, law, and leadership to talk about the moments that shape them and the strategies that sustain them. Here is your host, Chris Everett.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Numbers, where money always meets meaning and purpose. What if I told you that one of the leading voices in privacy law got her wake-up call not in a courtroom or a law school classroom, but standing in line at Target? So right after the massive 2013 data breach that exposed millions of Americans' personal information, remember that? Well, today's guest is a licensed attorney, a certified information privacy professional, and the president of a company born from the most unlikely of first dates, a dinner conversation about privacy policies. Yeah, you heard that right. So while most couples bond over travel stories or favorite movies, our guest and her now husband bonded over their shared frustration with the legal maze of website compliance. She's the chair of the American Bar Association's e-privacy committee. She's a fellow of the American Bar Foundation. She served as the ABA representative to the United Nations Economic and Social Council. And she's the host of Privacy Law's podcast, because apparently privacy law can be both important and entertaining. But here's what makes her story truly compelling. So she saw small businesses drowning in expensive legal fees just to create basic privacy policies. So in 2016, she co-founded a company to democratize privacy compliance, making it affordable and accessible for everyone from solo entrepreneurs to Fortune 500 companies. And to date, her platform has generated thousands upon thousands of policies, keeping businesses compliant as laws like General Data Protection Regulation or the GDPR, California Consumer Privacy Act, or the CCPA, and dozens of state-level privacy regulations continue to evolve. This is what I like about her, too. She's a beekeeper. She's a morel mushroom hunter and someone who reads books about mountain climbing and submarines for fun. Her journey proves that the most meaningful businesses often start with a personal pain point, true, and a dinner conversation. Today, we're talking about privacy, entrepreneurship, building with purpose, and what it means to protect the little guy in a world where data breaches make headlines almost every week. Please join me in welcoming Donata Stroink-Skillrud. Donata, welcome to Beyond the Numbers.
Thanks so much, Chris. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so let's start with your origin story, because I think it's one of the most unique founding stories I've heard in a while. You know, you and your hubby Hans meet during the sale of a website development company, and then on your first date, you bond over privacy policies. Tell me that story, and what were you both so frustrated about?
Yeah, so I guess first of all, I'd like to say that I didn't think or know that it was a date. I thought it was a business meeting, and I knew something was up because he showed up on time wearing nice shoes instead of like the usual sneakers and sweatpants garb that I've seen him in. So I knew something was up there. So for me as a lawyer, the frustrating part about privacy policies in terms of service at the time was that the process was really repetitive. So I would ask my clients very similar questions like, what information are you collecting? Who do you share it with? And then I had like 5 templates that I would Frankenstein together. And this was before all the privacy laws of today. And it was just really repetitive and really boring. And a lot of businesses couldn't afford my service either. And for Hans, his firm was building websites for clients, and he would have clients ask him what should they do for website policies, or they would ask him to copy and paste a competitor's policies for them. And he really just wasn't comfortable doing that. And he also had have a service that he could confidently recommend to others for their policies. So he was really frustrated by just not being able to help his clients. And we were just talking about that during the dinner, and we kind of thought, okay, we have the same problem, just two different sides of the coin. And that's where the idea for Termageddon came from.
Sweet. Okay, so that's a fun story. So, but before Termageddon, there was the Target breach in 2013, right? And then you said that getting that data breach notice was a pivotal moment for you. It like opened your eyes to how a lack of proper security around personal data can impact real people. So, what went through your mind when you got that notice, and how did that personal experience shape the way you approach privacy laws today?
So at that time, I would shop at Target, and one of the cashiers said, we have this credit card. Do you want to apply for this credit card and get discounts and points? And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. I applied for the card. And then a couple years later, I got that data breach notice in the mail. So I got that letter. And honestly, I was just really shocked and really lost. Like, my personal information and my payment information was exposed in a breach. What do I do now? And I felt like I really couldn't trust the recommendations of what to do in the letter, because the letter came from the company that could not protect my personal information in the first place. And it was really the first time that I thought, wow, like, I give my information to these companies and it may not be entirely safe. And it really just felt like a huge breach of my trust. I thought, Target's this huge company. They have all their stuff together. They know what they're doing. It's safe for me to give my information to them. And then the letter was kind of like, no, it really wasn't. So it was a really big breach of trust. And to me, privacy and security mean not betraying the trust of customers. And because of that experience, I really felt like, okay, when people have their privacy breached or their data breached, there will be consequences. So, for example, like to this day, I don't have a Target credit card and I refuse to sign up for one. And anytime the cashier asks me, do you want this? I say no, because I'm not really interested in giving my information to them anymore.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people feel that way. When trust is violated with a company, you're really not going to be that interested to work with them anymore or give them your information anymore.
truly. I think it was maybe 20, maybe even 25 years ago, I had someone defraud my credit card. And that was rare 25 years ago, right? 20. I felt so violated and I felt humiliated. I thought I did something wrong. Yeah. But nowadays, it's like every time you turn around, somebody's getting defrauded. You could really see why the whole blockchain technology and hopefully more secure system could really be coming online. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's almost like somebody breaking into your house, you just don't feel right there anymore. And I feel like it's the same way with these companies. Like, if I'm getting spam calls and spam texts from you at all hours of the day and night, I'm not going to be interested in working with you, unfortunately. And I think in terms of security, there's a lot of laws coming out right now, for example, from the European Union that say that you need to have a plan for your company to stay up so people can continue using your services in case of a data breach or an attack. And it's more about making the C-level executives responsible for this stuff as well. It currently in a lot of large companies, the C-level executives are like, oh, this is IT's problem. IT will take care of security. And what's interesting about these laws from the EU, it's like, no, no, no. Like, you're a C-level executive, you're responsible for this. And I really think that this will lead to better security because the people at the top will be more incentivized to take it seriously as well.
Sure. Well, I have a small company, but we have to be very careful at everything that we do. Obviously, you're dealing with people's money, but if there is a breach, we have to immediately notify everyone.
Yeah, the problem with the notification, in the US, we have a lot of these data breach notification laws. The problem is notification is after the fact. Like, obviously, you have to let consumers know that their data is breached so that they can take the right steps to protect them. But in reality, we should be focusing more on trying to prevent these breaches from happening and providing businesses with guidance and information and help, because it's a big Fortune 500 company. They have a lot of money. They can invest in cybersecurity versus small businesses are kind of left on their own. There's not a great one place that provides information of what to do and how to protect this information, which be helpful.
Well, again, we are small, but we have set up secure portals. So if a client wants to share information with us, we beg them to never give it to us over an email, but to please upload it to the portal. Yeah, you have to do that.
Yeah, but people, people do whatever they want to do. There's people who submit confidential information over website contact form.
Oh, all the time. It's crazy. Yeah. So what do you think about the blockchain, though? I touched on it for a sec. Do you think that's going to help us?
I think it's interesting, but I think the technology is not necessarily there for everyday use. I mean, there are some uses of blockchain technology when it comes to like payments and stuff, but in reality, like most consumers don't have like a Bitcoin wallet or whatever. So those kinds of tools are not really used by the vast majority of consumers. The vast majority of consumers have a credit card or they have a bank account. So I think the technology is just not doesn't have the mass adoption that we need just yet, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future.
Yeah, I think it's coming down the port. So because a lot of the large banking institutions, even the credit card companies, they have been tooling in the background relative to blockchain. So should be interesting over the next maybe even just year or two to see what happens. Yeah. So you went to John Marshall Law School. You were in private practice writing privacy policies manually for clients. You were doing work through a business clinic helping small businesses navigate legal requirements. You're really a nice person. And at what point did you realize there has to be a better way to do this?
Yes, I think it was the conversation that I had with Hans on our date where we kind of shared our frustrations, same problem, just two different sides of it. And, I was just writing so many privacy policies in terms of service for my clients. And it really wasn't a fun time for me as a lawyer doing it because it was so repetitive and just doing it over and over and over again. I was like, I'm asking very similar questions. There's a lot of similarities between these businesses. And really, for each business, we're trying to figure out the same things, which privacy laws apply to them and disclosures required by those laws. And then you're trying to match them up to their actual business and privacy practices. So, for example, you need to say, what personal information are you collecting? And this client has a contact form that collects names, emails, and phone numbers, right? So the information gathering process is very similar. The text could potentially be similar between different businesses if they're doing similar things. And it was just very cumbersome matching those things up every single time and working with a bunch of templates and trying to pull one thing from one template, another thing from another template. And I just thought, this kind of sucks. Like, this is not fun for me as a lawyer, kind of sucks for the clients too, because they have to pay a lot of money for me to do this. And that was the thought behind automating things. Like, we can make this a lot easier. We can also create a software that automates this so it can be a lot more cost effective for people too. And then for lawyers, instead of asking the same questions over and over again and trying to Frankenstein these templates, lawyers can go back to doing like actual legal work, which is providing legal advice to their clients, which is something that our company doesn't do because we're not a law firm, but we help automate that kind of terrible part of it, so you can do the actual fun stuff.
So now I'm understanding a little bit why you call yourself a legal engineer, right? So you build these policy questionnaires, the answer options, thousands of different variations of text, very different from a traditional legal practice. So how did you learn to think like an engineer? What was that transition like?
So, really, like going back to the very beginning, I think as lawyers, we're taught to think like an engineer before we even get to law school because we take the LSAT, which is the law school admissions test. So, for people who don't know, LSAT is mostly logic problems. So, for example, you might have to determine on which assumption an argument depends, or have the ability to make the right inferences and provide the method of reasoning. So, there's a lot of if X, then Y in the LSAT. So, I hated the LSAT. Studying for the LSAT, I just would not get it. It took me like months to actually understand what this is, what the point of it is, how to work through the problems. But once I got it, it kind of clicked. So my current job is pretty similar in that there's a lot of logic problems that are involved. Like If a business needs to comply with GDPR and they use consent as the legal basis for processing personal data, which snippet of text should their privacy policy have? Or if they need to comply with two different privacy laws that have different timelines for responding to consumer requests, what should their privacy policy say as to when they will respond? So it's a lot of if this, then that. And to me, the transition, as a lawyer, you're writing up a lot of documents. As a legal engineer, you're making endless flow charts with if this, then that statements. So if they do this, then they need to comply with this law. Or if they need to comply with this law, then their policies need to state X. So my life is flow chart, but those flow charts connect to documents that have the proper text for the right scenario.
Okay. So when you launched Termageddon in 2016, 3 years after that data breach, even before the GDPR regulations went into effect in 2018, were you seeing that regulatory wave coming?
Yes and no. So at that time, GDPR was being discussed and finalized. So we knew it was going to become law. We also knew that it was going to be heavily enforced when it did go into effect. So at the time, we didn't know that there was going to be a big demand for GDPR compliance and privacy policies at the time. But, to be honest, there's a lot of stuff that we didn't predict either. So we didn't predict the state privacy law patchwork in the United States or how complicated compliance would get. So at the time, there were a few states like California and Delaware that had privacy laws that were really simple and they weren't really much enforced at that time. They were enforced a little bit, but there's just no way to know that all these states would propose and pass their own laws and that they would all be different, creating this kind of messy patchwork that we have right now, at least in the US. But, it's what keeps the job interesting, I guess.
So one thing that stands out about Termageddon is that you're the only privacy policy generator company, at least I believe, whose founder and president is an actual privacy attorney. Why does that matter?
Just like other generators, we're a software company. We're not a legal services provider, but we are different in the way that our software works. So to figure out what your privacy policy needs to say, a lot of people think that a privacy policy is just random legalese, and it really isn't. It's based on actual standards. So it's based on privacy laws. So privacy laws actually have like a list of what your privacy policy needs to say if you need to comply with that law. So for us, we have a privacy law identifier, which helps figure out which privacy laws apply to the business. And we ask the questions to figure out which laws apply instead of just saying, do you need GDPR compliance? Because to be honest, like most businesses don't know that. Most businesses don't know who GDPR applies to or who CPRA applies to, who Virginia's privacy law applies to. So we ask you where you do business, whose personal information you're collecting. And we also ask for the thresholds. So some privacy laws only apply to larger businesses. So we ask those questions to figure out which laws apply. We're also the most comprehensive generator on the market as well. So we cover over 120 website related laws, rules, and regulations. We don't make assumptions for you. So we ask you questions about your business and your privacy practices. So, if you have a privacy policy generated by somebody else, it might say, we engage in targeted advertising. Even though they never ask you if your website does targeted ads, we actually ask you to figure out what you're actually doing. And we don't just make stuff up for you because your privacy policy does need to match your actual business and privacy practices. And then we also update policies for new legislation before they go into effect, not after, because the effective date is when enforcement starts. So if something goes into effect January 1st and you update your policy on February 2nd, there's an entire month of a gap where you put yourself at risk. So we make sure to push updates before that effective date as well.
Okay. You're preaching to the choir. So in my business, obviously we have to have an updated privacy policy every year. And we go through audits. So everything has to be stated as you're actually doing it. So I get it.
Yeah. So end up, if your generator makes stuff up for you, you might be saying that you share information with third parties that you don't share it with. You might be saying that you're applying these security measures where you actually aren't. And that can definitely lead to a lot of trouble.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thinking about the privacy landscape today, We've got the GDPR, General Data Protection Rights in Europe, the CCPA, the California Privacy Protection Policy out there in Cali, and its updated version, the CPRA, or the California Privacy Rights Act. So over 15 state-level privacy laws proposed or passed in the US, and new regulations popping up constantly, like you were just talking about. So for a business owner listening right now, what should they actually be worried about? Like how do they even begin to wrap their heads around compliance?
Yeah, so privacy can be overwhelming because there's so many regulations and laws and rules and enforcement actions. It's easy to get lost. But the first thing that any business needs to do is figure out which privacy laws apply to you, because that's what dictates your requirements that you're subject to. So, don't assume that your business is too small. There's plenty of privacy laws that apply regardless of business size, the number of employees I have, the amount of revenue or the amount of data that you collect. Don't assume that you're home free because you're a nonprofit. There's many privacy laws that apply to nonprofits as well as for-profit businesses. Privacy laws don't care where your business is located because they're trying to protect consumers. So what matters is whose data you're collecting, where your customers are located, where you offer goods and services, and who you track through your site. So the first step would be figuring out which laws apply to you. I see, for the second part, I see that a lot of businesses get caught up in this. So they say, we're not collecting personal information. Understand that most modern websites are collecting personal information. So if you have a contact form, if you have an email newsletter sign up, analytics, advertising, you're collecting personal information, and privacy laws can apply as soon as that information is collected. And it doesn't matter that people are providing it voluntarily. That does not exempt you from privacy laws. And as a business, you can take some first line steps that can greatly reduce your risk. So that would include getting website policies in place, and it also includes getting a consent banner on your website. We've seen a lot of small businesses getting sued for California Invasion of Privacy Act violations. So if you have people from California potentially visiting your site and you're tracking them through analytics, advertising, chat features, any kind of cookies or trackers, you want to make sure that you have a consent banner in place, that you don't track people without consent in California, because that's a really kind of hot issue right now for businesses of any size.
Very interesting, right? So you serve as chair of the American Bar Association's e-privacy committee, and you're the previous chair of the Chicago chapter of the International Association of Privacy Professionals. You literally talk to the authors and enforcers of privacy laws. What are they telling you? Like, where is privacy regulation headed in maybe the next 3 to 5 years?
So I think the main message from regulators that they have for businesses is that if you want to collect personal information of residents of certain states or countries, you want to track how they use your website, you want to make money off of them, you have to follow the rules of their state or country. So there's an economic incentive for you to collect this information, to do business in these places, to track these people. You have to make sure that you follow the rules of their location, or you should be prepared to be fined or sued. Now, in terms of what regulators say or do, really depends on where the regulator is located themselves. So, for example, if you reach out to regulators in the EU, Canada, or Australia with a question, they will answer your question point blank. They'll give you a ton of resources, ton of information and support. They will help you. If you reach out to a regulator in the US, it doesn't matter how simple your question is. The answer will almost always be, we can't provide legal advice, or read these regulations. And you reply with, I read the regulations, but this doesn't make any sense. We can't provide legal advice. So it really depends on the regulator as well, of how much help they're willing to give a business. In terms of what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years, there's what I feel will happen and what I hope will happen. So I hope that privacy laws in the US get standardized, or that we get a comprehensive federal privacy law. That would make my life a lot easier. That would make the lives of businesses a lot easier. But what I think will actually happen is that the state privacy law patchwork will just increase. So more and more states are proposing and passing their own privacy laws, all of which are slightly different, have slightly different requirements, and don't exactly match. So I really think that this patchwork that we have right now in the United States will only get more complicated, unfortunately.
So on your podcast, Privacy Laws, which is a fantastic name, by the way, you interview privacy professionals, discuss cases, and break down legislation. So what's been the most eye-opening or maybe surprising conversation you had from
So
your guests?
Yeah, to me, the most eye-opening one was a podcast episode that we did about automated license plate readers. So I live in Illinois, and I did not know. I mean, being a privacy lawyer, I did not know this. So how would you expect a layperson to know this? But there are license plate readers all over the state that automatically take a picture of your license plate if you're in that area. I did not know that these license plate readers are owned and operated by a third-party company called Flock, and that they actually share this information, where your license plate was, where your car was, at what time and at what location, with third parties without consent or permission to do so. That was uncovered during an audit. So to me, it was really surprising to know that there's this level of surveillance, whereas it's not truly really necessary. I found that really surprising and concerning.
So it's interesting. So you're talking about like you had a stop sign and they take a picture of your car, your license. That's done by a third party. And we have law enforcement using this third party service, really breaking privacy trust.
Correct. Yeah. So, we don't know, as residents of Illinois, we never agreed for these pictures of our license plates to be taken, because this isn't just a picture of a license plate. I was by this church at this time in my car, or I was by this clinic, or I was by the school, or I was by this person's house, and we have no control over these pictures that are being taken of our license plates. There's a whole lot of data that goes along with it, like location and time, and it's all managed by a third party, and it's being shared by that third party, not just with law enforcement agencies, but with others as well. And yeah, it's really scary, especially since they're sharing it without authorization as well.
Yeah, no kidding. So is this third party firm, I think you mentioned it's called Flock?
Flock,
Flock?
flock. Mhm.
Are they an American company?
They are, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't share data with certain government entities that maybe they don't have the right to see this data, or who knows how they're going to use it. So a lot of states are actually removing these license plate readers, or they're requiring Flock to stop sharing it with third parties, with other government agencies in violation of the law, or maybe they're considering using other companies to do these license plate readers. And the fact is that when it comes to law enforcement, there's so many other ways to obtain this data. Let's say somebody was committing a crime, you could get a warrant and get access to their location from their cell phone, or things like that. So there are legal ways to obtain this data. So it doesn't necessarily mean that law enforcement would be hobbled by not having this data anymore. But, maybe this type of surveillance isn't really truly necessary.
Right, I would tend to agree. Interesting, fascinating. So this show is called Beyond the Numbers because we believe the best decisions happen when money meets meaning and purpose. So you've built this profitable business, but you've also built something that fundamentally helps small businesses, the solo entrepreneur, the mom and pop shop, giving them the access to legal protection they really couldn't get otherwise or afford. Let's perhaps say that. So how do you think about that intersection of money and meaning and purpose in your own life and work?
Yeah. So, to me, we're a small business ourselves. So there's 10 people that work here. We started with just myself and Hans. So we've been a small business this entire time. And it's difficult being a small business because there's so much information out there, but it's so hard to get the right information. And when I was helping clients as a lawyer, if you can afford a lawyer, that's awesome. You should definitely use a lawyer if you can afford one. But there's so many people that can't, and they're left without protections. And if they get fined or sued, then their entire business can go down because of that. And not just that, I mean, consumers nowadays are looking for privacy policies. They're looking for terms of service. They're not comfortable using companies that abuse their privacy or that don't have these documents for them to look at. So to me, privacy can be a competitive advantage as well. And I really think that for small businesses, that's important, right? You need every single advantage that you can get. And because there's no really good, true resources out there provided by the government or by certain entities that are more public entities, I think it's really important to get the right information. And we really focus on education as well. So it's not just, oh, here's the product, buy it, use it. We have a very extensive blog where we write about compliance requirements. And as a small business, like, here are the things you should look at on your website that are not privacy friendly. Here are the things that can put you at risk. So we offer those tangential resources as well. So to me, that's very important. It's not just providing the product, but also providing good quality, true information that people can use as well.
Well, that's real helpful. So people should be, going towards your blog. We'll have all that in the show notes later as well. But I want to go back a second to when we were talking about those stoplight pictures. One thing I forgot to ask you, which is coming up for me now, is Illinois looking to take that off? Or are
Yeah.
they?
So Illinois is more so as because of this audit, certain cities are looking into just completely taking out the cameras entirely versus other areas that are looking into requiring having a more comprehensive contract with Flock, potentially prohibiting them from sharing that information with certain entities. Potentially imposing fines on the company for sharing this data. So it's kind of going city by city, really. So it's not necessarily statewide efforts, which again, very frustrating, right? Like we could save so much taxpayer time and money if we just looked at it on a state level and said, okay, in our state, we're doing this with these cameras, instead of every city making their own decision.
Well, and this is kind of new information coming out, so I can imagine they're all still just processing it too, right? Yeah. So success measured so many different ways, Donata, revenue impact, relationships, legacy. What are you leaving behind? How do you personally measure success? Like, what is really most important to you at this place in your career and your life?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the place, right? So for me at the American Bar Association, one of the things that I do is I work with a lot of law students. I've mentored like hundreds of law students throughout my career. And in my mind, success there is helping somebody in a way that I didn't have when I was in school. So when I was in school, I was in my final year and I was like, oh man, I need to like find a job, right? I need to start thinking about that. So I go into my school's career office and I say, hey, what can you guys do to help me find a job? And they're like, well, you should reach out to people in your network. And I'm like, if I had a network that would be offering me jobs, I wouldn't be here. So part of what I do with the law students is offer them resources that I was not offered. Here's what you should be doing in your first year, your second year, your third year. Yeah, here's the number of a recruiter that does privacy job placement. Here's why you should write an article and how we can publish this article. And here's, the newsletter that we send out every month. Let me send a write up of you and what kind of job you're looking for in this newsletter. So it's helping people with opportunities that I was not given or information that I was not provided to help them kind of get a leg up in their career. When it comes to work, making sure that all of our staff is happy, that people have a good place to work, that they're excited to come to work, that we're doing things that we're excited about, doing things that we all love doing. So for me, my favorite part of my job is the legal engineering part. So, doing more of the things that everybody loves doing and helping our clients and providing them with the support that we wish we would get from companies. It's never fun to have a question, reach out to a company, hear back in 10 days. Oh, we'll get back to you later. We're not sure. Or, oh, you need to ask somebody else, or you need to call this other department. You want an answer right now and you want an actual answer. So helping people along with their journey and providing them that education and that support.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. So you remind me of have you ever heard of the Berkman tool? Berkman assessment. So Berkman was founded back in the 50s, and they basically just really help you see where in life you're going to be fit to flourish. And so power tools. So whenever I hire someone, they'll do a Berkman, they'll do a Colby analysis so we can make sure they're in the right spot doing the right things. Because you touched on it. If you're really in a spot that fits you, you'll be happier, you'll do much better work all the way around.
Absolutely. And it's really my hope to that our staff feels that way as well. What's the projects that you're passionate about? Let's put you on those projects. Or Maybe this is an area that you don't want to touch. Okay, we're going to have somebody else do that. So getting everybody in the right place doing stuff that they're excited about. And yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff. You've accomplished a lot. You've founded a thriving SaaS company. And so, for those of you who wonder what SaaS means, it's software as a service. You have leadership roles at the ABA, IAPP, your podcast, you're teaching others about privacy compliance. What do you want your legacy to be? When you look back on everything that you've built or will be building, what do you hope they say about you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I just, want to be remembered as somebody who helped people, whether it's, a law student who's desperate for a job, who needs experience and doesn't know what to do, or maybe it's a business that's just very overwhelmed by all this stuff and doesn't understand and just needs you to lay it out in the clearest terms. I just want to help people. And that's pretty much my goal.
I love that. So then, what if money was never going to be an object for you? You never had to work another day in your life, never had to think about income or making payroll, whatever it was. What lights you up? What do you want to be doing? And you know, I touched on it early when I introed you about the beekeeping and the morel hunting and all your other passion projects. So, who are you if nothing else mattered?
Yeah, I think a lot of small business owners will resonate with this that when you're a small business owner, you wear so many hats, right? Like, I'm the president, I'm the legal engineer, I also run the payroll, I also do the books, I also do support, and there's like 1,000 things that you're doing. And I think, if money was no object, I would probably drop some of those, right? Like, I don't really want to do the books. Like, let's be real. I would love to have somebody else do that. So there's definitely some aspects of the job that I would probably have like somebody else do. I would definitely want to stay in the legal engineer role because I love that. That's my passion. I love doing it. So, after work, I would love to just like live on a farm, the chickens and the bees, probably get like a couple horses or something. Maybe get an alpaca or two. My grandpa and I are both very obsessed with those and really want to try that out. So I think that would be really fun. And just do more of that while also maintaining the legal engineer role because I love my job, so I'd love to keep that. But doing more of like the farming stuff, I think would be great.
We're kind of kindred on a couple levels. I have a chicken condo in my backyard, and as soon as they approve chickens in my town, I'm going to get a few chickens. But also, you know, I have no idea when I'm going to retire. And the reason that is because I just love what I do. I could have retired a couple of years ago, but I keep going. And then thank God Warren Buffett retired at 95. So now I get to say, well, geez, if Warren could do it till 95, I don't think I'm going to go to 95. But as long as you really love what you're doing, just keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as you can and you're competent in doing it and there's some people at the Senate that maybe I think should hang up their hats. But, I do think that as people we need that activity, right? Like we need to be doing something. I don't know how people who just retire and do nothing, like what is that like? I don't think I'm the type of person to do that. So I think I'd always be up to something.
Yeah. Oh, you don't want to atrophy for sure. So, you said that one of the best pieces of advice you received was never to be afraid of asking questions, even if they seem like stupid questions. Really, I don't think there is such a thing. So, that's important wisdom, especially in privacy law where things don't always make logical sense. What advice would you give someone who's either building a business or trying to navigate the complex world of legal compliance?
Yeah, so really try to figure out where you're at right now. So look at seeing what have you done so far? Have I done nothing so far? Did I get a privacy policy up on my website in 2018 and haven't looked at it? What have I done so far? Who should be the one that's responsible for this? Um, you know, Compliance always gets pushed to the bottom of the list, and that's an unfortunate truth, but it does need to be pushed forward a little bit. You can't just put it away and put it away and put it away, hoping that one day you'll get to it, because there are some pretty significant risks of just ignoring this. But assigning one person to be responsible for it definitely makes sure that it doesn't slip through the cracks. And also, compliance comes from the top. So you can't just assign it to a low-level employee, hope that they do it, and then never give any oversight. Employees can tell when the people at the top don't think that something is important. They'll push it up as well, and they won't take it seriously unless you do from the top. So I personally like to lead by showing myself as the example. So, I'm going to take it seriously. So you're going to take it seriously as well. And I think that's really important when it comes to companies that have more than just a few employees, is communicating that this is actually important for us as a business. And here's what we're going to do about it. And here's who's going to do it. So assign responsibilities appropriately and communicate that as well.
Yeah, that's really good. So I think compliance is a blessing and a curse. So we have, in my industry, we have compliance oversight constantly. So we have things scheduled out a year in advance of everything that we need to do, and accountability in order to get it done, in my industry anyway. So I can see where this could really be a problem for people who don't have that kind of oversight and accountability.
Yeah, when you're in a heavily regulated industry, it's part of your business, right? It's something you're used to, it's in your schedule, you have to do it. But let's say you're not a part of a highly regulated industry, then it's something new, right? It's
Yeah.
something new that you have to add to your schedule, and something that you have to prioritize, and something that you have to communicate to your staff is important. So it's definitely kind of a mindset shift for sure.
So I want people to know that you are also an international business. So in the last 6 months, you launched in the European Union, and now you're working on expanding Termageddon to New Zealand. What excites you most about the future, both for your business, Termageddon, and for the privacy field, kind of as a whole?
So, in terms of the privacy field, we offer privacy policies, and we offer other documents as well, like the terms of service. One thing that I find really interesting about launching in new countries is kind of how law and culture come together. So, you can tell in different countries that the laws reflect the culture of that country. And I think that's really fun and interesting to learn. And we're excited to launch in other places because we've had potential customers reach out to us saying, "Hey, do you cover these laws or these areas?" Well, no, we're not available there, and people kind of don't know what to do next. So we're very excited to offer our service there to be able to help more people for sure. And in addition to that, we'll also be launching in South Africa soon as well. So we actually
Wonderful.
just finished testing that yesterday, so we should be ready to go soon.
Well, Donata, thank you for sharing your story, your insights, and your mission with us today. So, for listeners who want to learn more about Termageddon or connect with you, where should they go?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, termageddon.com. You can find us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you can also connect with me in LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. And of course, we'll have that in the show notes below. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on Beyond the Numbers today. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might benefit from hearing Donata's story, especially anyone running a website who needs to get their privacy policies sorted out. So until the next time, remember the best decisions happen where money meets meaning and purpose. Have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.
Beyond the Numbers podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.